Hey, what's up guys, how's it going? So, the Game Boy Advance. Now to kind of sum this console up, it's basically a buffed up Super Nintendo that could somewhat handle 3D. Now, 3D games on the Game Boy Advance are very few and far between because it was primarily a 2D console. You know, it's had its fair share of platformers, fighters, shooters, RPGs, licensed games, classic games, a little bit of everything. To see a 3D game running on the Game Boy Advance at all was kind of weird. But hey, enough with the bullshit. I'm just gonna point out some cool 3D Game Boy Advance games, and if you want to, stick around, but I guess enough bullshit. Let's get started.
Pluck things from the ground and hurl them at your enemies. Pluck your enemies from the ground and hurl them at your other enemies. Super Mario Advance, only for Game Boy Advance. 4 can play off 1 game pack. Rated E for everyone.
Alright, now the first category I want to get started with is shooters. Now, the Game Boy Advance has seen its fair share of 2D shooters and 3D shooters. Of course, we're going to be talking about the 3D ones. Now, the 3 I want to talk about is Doom, Doom 2, and of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Duke Nukem.
It's time to kick gum and chew ass.
First few games I'm going to be talking about are the Doom games. Now, obviously, running Doom on the GBA, it's not going to look the best. Obviously, some things are going to have to be cut, but I still feel like it's a reasonable port. I mean, for sake, Doom can be run on anything, from a pregnancy test to a McDonald's screen to a graphing calculator to a printer to an iWatch and even an ATM machine. Doom could literally run on anything. I would be surprised if the Game Boy Advance couldn't run Doom. Anyway, like I said before, there's a few ups and downs with this game, but I feel it's a decent port of Doom. Obviously, it's based off of the Jaguar version of Doom, and for some reason the blood is green. I'm assuming they did that because, it was on a Game Boy and they thought kids were gonna play it. I don't know. So I think I talked enough about Doom. You already know what it is at this point. It's Doom on the Game Boy Advance. What else do I have to say? Obviously, they have to make some cuts. Obviously, they have to make some downgrades. But at the end of the day, it's a decent port. Now let's talk about one more Game Boy Advance shooter, and that is Duke Nukem Advance.
I'm here to shit ass.
Duke Nukem Advance. Now, this game looks like it's really pushing the GBA. I mean, you got a variety of different levels, and I mean, it's Duke Nukem. It's simple. You just run and shoot people. Well, obviously, that's the compressor for the Game Boy Advance, but still, this game is great. It has that classic Duke Nukem feel, simple controls. You move with the D-pad, shoot with the A button. This game is great so far, and honestly, no complaints. Although it does come with a bit of story. You have to fight aliens or something, or destroy some time bomb. The story is not really important. You only get like 2 cutscenes, and that's really it. You don't really have a proper ending to the story. But overall, this is a great game. Now look, enough of Duke Nukem, enough of Doom, enough of shooters. Let's talk about something different. Let's talk about platformers. Now, this game honestly kind of shocked me when I first looked it up. It's like a fully 3D platformer for the Game Boy Advance. It's called Asterix and Obelix XXL. Apparently, this is a long-running video game franchise. To be honest, I've never heard of it. But this Game Boy Advance game looks freaking dope. I mean, if you thought Duke Nukem was pushing the Game Boy Advance, this has to be. I mean, just look at this thing. This looks like an early PlayStation 1 game running on a Game Boy Advance. I mean, this just shows that the Game Boy Advance had way more potential than people give it for. In fact, the games I'm showing you today should make you want to get a Game Boy Advance. Just saying. You get the SP or the original, doesn't matter. Just get a Game Boy Advance, play it on original hardware. That's all I'm saying. But back to the game. It's your basic platform where you have to, defeat some enemies. And believe it or not, the controls are fairly easy. Obviously, you move the D-pad, punch with the A or B button. And the game is really easy for the most part. I think it's more of, a 3D demo for the Game Boy Advance. But still, this game is amazing. As amazing as this game is, let's move on to another great 3D platformer for the Game Boy Advance, Super Monkey Ball Jr. Now, as we all know, Super Monkey Ball requires a lot of accuracy. So how the fuck did they port this to the Game Boy Advance? I imagine this game couldn't have been easy to put on the Game Boy Advance, but somehow they did it. Obviously, you move the D-pad and you move either faster or slower with the A and B buttons. Yeah, it's your basic Super Monkey Ball formula. This released in between Monkey Ball 1 and 2. It comes with a bunch of levels and you also get some mini games too. But I honestly wouldn't recommend getting this game. I mean, it's fun at first glance, but you just get tired and frustrated after a while. Either way, I would say it's a fun game for like 5 or 10 minutes. Oh, and one more thing, if you play this game on real hardware, your thumbs are gonna get really fucking sore. But hey, enough with the negatives. The game is fine for what it is. It's your basic Monkey Ball formula. That's really all I have to say on it. Now let's move on to something a little bit different. How about some snowboarding?
You guys say Colorado!
SSX3. Now this game isn't really pushing the GBA too much like the other games I've showed. It's honestly just 2D characters in a 3D world, and you know what? It's not the best. But again, it's the Game Boy Advance. This handheld could handle literally anything you throw at it at this point. The game is definitely not as good as the console ports, but it's still decent, nonetheless. It's a quick game that you can get over with in 5 minutes. However, I do want to mention its counterpart, SSX Tricky for the Game Boy Advance. It kind of does the same thing, except it looks a tad bit worse. However, it was able to get like the full, SSX Tricky intro on the Game Boy Advance. Again, I don't know how the fuck they did it back in the day, but they did. Both games are the same. It honestly doesn't matter which one you pick. Although I gotta say, SSX Tricky does have a cool intro. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I really gotta show for right now. I just kinda want to show off some cool 3D Game Boy Advance games, because nobody ever really talks about this shit. Nobody really talks about how cool this is, and I figured, why not? But look, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to, like, subscribe, do whatever you want to do, Nourish, and tell me down below. What's your favorite Game Boy Advance game? Tell me down in the comments, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.
Dear Mario, from Peach.